Malik Beasley is on the verge of losing it all. A reported $42 million contract and maybe his entire career in the NBA. He's at the center of a massive federal betting scandal, and a federal investigation is closing in. So, is he the next Jontay Porter, the guy who just got banned for life for fixing games? Or is he just the victim of a high-stakes witch hunt? We're about to break down the shady betting lines that could decide his future. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York is spearheading this investigation. That's the exact same office that just went after Jontay Porter. This isn't some small issue. It's a federal case that could send shockwaves through the entire league. The news hit the NBA world like a ton of bricks. Malik Beasley, a 9-year veteran and one of the league's most lethal three-point shooters, is under federal investigation for allegations tied to gambling on NBA games. The probe is zeroing in on his time with the Milwaukee Bucks during the 2023-24 season and involves some very suspicious activity around his player prop bets. For anyone who doesn't know, player prop bets are wagers on what a single player will do in a game, like how many points they'll score, assists they'll dish out, or rebounds they'll grab. Right away, the NBA confirmed it was cooperating with the investigation, and so did the Detroit Pistons, the team he played for last season. This isn't just a rumor, it's a full-blown federal probe that has put Beasley's career on ice. He was reportedly deep in talks with the Pistons for a new 3-year, $42 million contract, but those negotiations have slammed to a halt. No team is going to touch him until this is over. Of course, his attorney, Steve Haney, was quick to state that an investigation is not a charge, and that Beasley should be presumed innocent. But in the court of public opinion, and more importantly, in the eyes of the NBA, the damage is already being done.
So, what happened that was serious enough to trigger a federal investigation? It all goes back to January 2024. According to reports, at least one major U.S. sportsbook flagged some unusually heavy and weirdly specific betting activity on Malik Beasley's individual stats. The main example everyone points to is a game on January 31st, 2024, when Beasley's Milwaukee Bucks were playing the Portland Trail Blazers. Out of nowhere, a huge amount of money started pouring in on bets that Beasley would get fewer than 2.5 rebounds in the game. The odds on the under for his rebounds swung wildly, from a plus 120 underdog to a massive minus 250 favorite right before the game started. Now, for anybody who doesn't bet, here's why that's a giant red flag. A line movement that drastic doesn't just happen. It means a ton of cash, often from what looks like a coordinated group, is all hitting one side of a bet. Bookmakers shift the odds to protect themselves from a big loss. But when people keep betting, even as the payout gets worse and worse, it suggests they think they have inside information, that the outcome is practically guaranteed. It's a classic sign that someone, somewhere, might be trying to rig the system. But here's the ironic part. The bet didn't even cash. Beasley went out and grabbed 6 rebounds that night, completely blowing past the 2.5 line and making all those suspicious bets lose. But for the sportsbooks and federal investigators, whether the bet won or lost is way less important than the betting pattern itself. That sheer volume and the insane line movement were more than enough to set off alarms and launch a probe that had been quietly developing for months before we ever heard about it.
If any of this sounds familiar, it's because we literally just watched this same script play out with Jontay Porter, and it ended with him being banned from the NBA for life. Porter's case is now the playbook for how the league deals with these gambling scandals. A former player for the Toronto Raptors, Porter was kicked out of the league for good after an investigation found he was giving tips to bettors and even changing his own performance to make sure certain prop bets would hit. The evidence against Porter was absolutely damning. For games on January 26 and March 20th, 2024, there were huge bets placed on him to underperform. In that March 20th game, a single $80,000 parlay was placed that would have paid out $1.1 million if Porter hit the under on his stats. And what do you know? Porter played for less than 3 minutes before pulling himself from the game, saying he felt sick. But it got even worse. The investigation found text messages where Porter, who was deep in gambling debt, was being told to clear it by doing a quote-unquote special, which meant taking himself out of games to rig the outcome. He was also caught sharing confidential health info with a known gambler and had placed at least 13 bets on NBA games himself using someone else's account, including bets where he wagered against his own team. With that mountain of proof, the NBA had no choice.
Porter was banned for life and later pleaded guilty to federal wire fraud charges. Porter's case set a very clear, very harsh precedent. It proved that the league, using data from legal sports books, has the power to sniff out this kind of corruption. It also proved the consequences are final. For Malik Beasley, the Jontay Porter case is a terrifying shadow hanging over him, showing exactly what happens when these kinds of allegations turn out to be true. This is where the story gets complicated, because it raises a huge question for the league. We have the precedent from the Porter case, but do we have the same kind of evidence here? Before we get into that critical difference, if you're finding this breakdown useful and want to stay on top of the biggest stories in sports, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. While you can't ignore the parallels to Jontay Porter's situation, there are some huge differences in Malik Beasley's case, at least with what we know publicly. The biggest one? Evidence. In Porter's case, investigators had the smoking gun, text messages, direct ties to bettors, and a clear pattern of him physically altering his play to impact bets. Porter even pleaded guilty in federal court. In Beasley's case, there are zero public reports of that kind of direct evidence. The entire investigation seems to be built on those suspicious betting patterns that the sportsbooks caught. His lawyer has been firm, stating, Malik has not been charged with any crime, and there has been no formal accusation of wrongdoing. He's hammering home the point about the presumption of innocence, and it's a valid one. Is it possible that some group of bettors just got a bad tip or tried to manipulate the market on their own without Beasley even knowing? Absolutely. This creates the central question of the entire story. Is this a real scandal or a witch hunt? The NBA is under tremendous pressure to protect the integrity of its games. After what happened with Porter, the league cannot afford to look weak on gambling. So this aggressive federal investigation might mean they found something truly serious. Or it could be a sign of our new reality, where any weird stat line or betting pattern is enough to put a player's entire career on the line. The investigation is still ongoing, and no one is saying Beasley is innocent or guilty. But without the kind of direct proof that sank Jontay Porter, the road to a lifetime ban looks a lot less certain. Taking a step back, the Malik Beasley case feels like a symptom of a much bigger problem for the NBA and all pro sports, the absolute explosion of legalized sports betting. Since the Supreme Court opened the floodgates in 2018, the industry has gone wild, and the NBA has leaned all the way in, signing massive partnership deals with betting companies and weaving odds and gambling talk right into its own broadcasts. This creates a huge conflict of interest for the league. It's making a fortune from an industry that is also the single biggest threat to its own integrity. On one hand, the transparency of the legal market is a good thing. It was the licensed sportsbooks that flagged the weird activity for both Porter and Beasley, almost acting like a built-in alarm system. Back in the day with illegal bookies, this stuff might have flown completely under the radar. But on the other hand, the sheer amount of betting available, especially on these individual player props, creates endless new ways for corruption to creep in. It's a lot easier for one player to quietly affect his own rebounding numbers than it is to throw an entire game. This makes role players, guys who aren't on huge multi-million-dollar contracts, especially vulnerable to the temptation of a fast payday. The NBA is now walking a tightrope, trying to cash in on gambling revenue while managing the catastrophic risk of fans losing faith that the games are on the level. Every new investigation, whether it ends in a conviction or not, chips away at that trust. For Malik Beasley, everything is on the line. The most immediate hit is financial. That reported 3-year, $42 million deal with the Pistons is gone, and it's tough to see any team signing him with a federal investigation hanging over his head. After a career-best season in Detroit, he was set up for the biggest contract of his life, and now is vanished, maybe for good. But the ultimate danger is that lifetime ban. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver has been crystal clear. A player betting on NBA games, especially their own, is the ultimate sin. It's the, quote, death penalty in sports, because it attacks the very idea of fair competition. If investigators uncover any proof that Beasley knew about or was involved in a scheme to rig prop bets, his career will be over, period. Even if he's eventually cleared of everything, the damage to his reputation might be permanent. He'll be linked to this scandal forever. That's the brutal truth of sports today. An accusation, even without a charge, can completely derail a career. Beasley has had off-court issues before, including serving a jail sentence in 2021 for a conviction related to a 2020 incident. And this new cloud of suspicion will only make teams more hesitant to take a chance on him. He's not just fighting for a contract, he's fighting for his name and his entire legacy in the league. The Malik Beasley saga is way more than just another sports scandal. It's a major test for the future of the NBA in the gambling age. On one side, you have suspicious betting patterns and a federal investigation that hints at serious corruption. On the other, you have a player who hasn't been charged with any crime and a defense that's pointing to the total lack of direct evidence. So what are we really watching here? Is this the next Jontay Porter, another player who got tangled up in the betting world and is about to face a lifetime ban? Or is Malik Beasley a casualty of the NBA's new, hyper-aggressive crackdown on gambling? A talented player caught in the crossfire of a league that's terrified of losing its integrity? The answer is going to have huge ripple effects, not just for Beasley's $42 million, but for how every player, team, and fan sees the game of basketball from now on. What do you think is going on here? Is he guilty, or is this a massive overreaction? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments.